Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, Joanne Reynolds. How are you? Joanne DeSimone Reynolds. And Joanne has a new book out, A Poetry Comes a Blossom, right here. And where can you buy that? Main Street Publishing?
Yes, on their website.
What's that website? Do you know offhand?
I don't know offhand.
Oh, okay.
No.
Well, look it up on Google, like, you know,
Yeah.
everything is found on Google these days. Well, I'm good. Thank you for coming, Joanne.
Thank you for having
You came
me.
all the way up from Situate
Yes, I did.
and stuff like that. So I'd like to read a brief bio to you. Joanne DeSimone Reynolds was born in Pennsylvania and raised in New Jersey. She earned a degree in English literature from Boston University. And we were there around the same time. You may be 1 year ahead of me,
Right.
but
Overlap.
we were there, right? Married after college and raised 2 children in the suburbs of Boston, surrounded by family on all sides. And she found a way to poetry later in life and published in Salamander, which is an excellent magazine, Ibbetson Street, which is an excellent magazine because I run it, and Sanctuary Magazine, among others. She's a member of the Concord Poetry Center, which was founded by, we interviewed her years ago, Joan Houlihan.
Yes.
Yep. And she has participated in a plein air
outside.
Plain air poetry at the Jackson Homestead in Newton and upcoming at Old Frog Pond in Harvard. She also writes reviews for the Boston area small press and poetry scene. Her chapbook, Comes a Blossom, was published this year by Main Street Rag. In it, she explores mother and daughter relationships, what is passed on, what is not, and what the effects of unresolved grief can be in those relationships. And she lives in Situate, Massachusetts, with her husband. So, again, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, Joanne, Joanne, right? Okay, right. This is your first book of poetry. What took you so long, and what brought you to the art? I mean, you did study literature at Boston University.
I did.
And who did you study with? Anyone you remember?
No.
Okay.
No, I just studied literature, but I didn't study poetry. I didn't have a tremendous interest in poetry. I thought of myself in many ways as a young person, as an artist.
Okay.
I would say that, avoidance was probably part of what was going on.
Okay.
I think, I was the kind of child who liked to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I liked to observe.
Mm-hmm.
I particularly liked to listen to grown-up conversation.
Okay.
And I would say that I was always thinking about the stories in my life, thinking about life in general, and eventually I found my way to a class at Lesley University with Nadia Colburn.
Okay.
And it was just an opportunity, later in life, once my father had passed,
Okay.
and my mother was in an assisted living, and I had an opportunity after raising children and taking care of them to turn to something that I was interested in. So.
Okay. Well, that's great. What took you so long for the first book? I mean, the first book in a long time.
Yeah. Yes, it did. It took a long time. Well, I took a long time to read a lot of poetry and to practice the craft. A lot of these poems are, 7, 8 years old.
Okay.
A lot of them actually came as I started to put the manuscript together. So.
Okay.
It's
Great.
just the process,
And how do you put a book together? I mean, you had a theme, obviously.
Yes. Well, I have probably 150 poems or something, and I thought about what would make a small chapbook, and there were a lot of mother-daughter poems, and I started there, and for me, there's a flow. This book has a real strong narrative arc. I call it my poemoir because it's poetry, but there's a lot of sort of memoir aspects to it. So, each poem flows one into the next, and by the end of the book, you get a clear understanding of a mother and a daughter, and even a little grandmother, and the newborn girl. So.
Now, the poet Kim Triedman, a mutual friend of ours, wrote about the chiseled sort of quality of your poetry, and that there's little left to chance, and the poems are distilled, she said, right? And how do you learn to cut the fat, so to speak? How do you learn to do that? How's that the process on cutting the fat?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I appreciate your asking. I am drawn to the shortest form.
Right.
I truly am. I'm not particularly I find that, longer poems, more narrative, it's harder to sort of keep that going. For me, if I even start with a long poem of my own, I sometimes just find myself going to the images, seeing, getting a feeling for what's really at the crux of what's going on. And it's fun for me, actually, to see if I can bring across an idea, an emotion, in a short,
I mean,
few
is your
lines.
natural inclination to write more than less? And that
No,
you have to,
I think my natural inclination is to write less.
is to write less?
I do. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, just to see, how little does it take to get some kind of an idea across or an emotion,
Okay.
across.
And that's a difficult process, isn't it?
Well, the hardest process, beginning, middle, and end. I mean, I think that some poems come very naturally. I could be lying in bed in the morning, and all of a sudden, something really comes very strongly and feels almost complete. And I can, go downstairs, open up the computer, and I can pretty much get it out there. Other poems have taken a very long time. They're not quite right. I put them aside. I pick them up.
Who have you studied with? Have you taken any workshops? Or?
I have studied with Nadia Colburn at Lesley University for 2.5 years. And I've taken probably the same 2.5 years with Tom Daly here
Excellent
in Cambridge.
poetry teacher.
Yeah, they're wonderful. They're really great people, great mentors, wonderful poets. I've had several groups of poets I've worked with over the years, very helpful as well. But I would say, as I've grown as a writer in my own mind, I find that I can be a pretty good editor of myself now in a lot of ways. Always good to run things by people, but I have a better sense of what I want to say. It's just practice. It's like everything.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the
There are
10,000
a few
hours.
natural-born writers,
Yeah,
but you still have
yeah.
to practice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the listening and the observing are really important. If you're
You know, as you know, I teach at Endicott and Bunker Hill, and I often tell, if I'm teaching poetry, I often tell you got to disconnect, the kids to disconnect, with the texting and the earphones and all this stuff, because you really have to be an observer of detail and things of that nature.
Yes, I think so. I certainly found that I think I was writing my whole life in my head.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm a son, of course, right?
Yeah.
And you're a daughter, and there's certainly obviously there's a unique relationship between mother and daughter as opposed to mother and son,
Yes.
right? How would you define that? Because this is the subject of your book, the mother and daughter relationships.
Yes.
So maybe you can, in your own mind, how would you define the difference?
Well, when you're raising the child that is the same, gender as your own, you can clash over what you think is the expectations. The child has expectations of the mother has expectations of the child, and they can clash a little bit, particularly if mother and daughter have slightly different temperaments, or very different temperaments. You never really know when a child is born to you. You have, I think a mother, may have the idea that the daughter is going to be like her. That's not necessarily true. Can be true. Many things are shared, but it can be a struggle for a daughter to move out from underneath the shadow of her mother. There's an old expression that a woman really doesn't come into her own until her own mother is dead, and there is something to that. The mother is not looking over your shoulder saying tisk tisk tisk, or whatever might be happening. So as for a son. It's a great. I have both. So, with my son, I would say, there's a love and a bonding, but he turns his eyes to the father at a certain point, and comes to the mother for certain kinds of comfort and advice. But there's not that kind of a clash. As a matter of fact, there's a little more of an attraction because your sons are beautiful to you, and you can respond to that sort of. Boy-girl thing. But
Okay. Now, there's a strong religious sensibility that runs through your work, and it seems there's a lot of bashing of religion, and especially, unfortunately, with all the scandals that have been going on. But in this book, the rituals provide solace and comfort and are the very texture of your life. Tell me your thoughts about that, religion and
Yes.
poetry.
Yeah. It's very true. I think that for me as a child, my parents were not religious in that classic sense of, you might think like an Irish Catholic family or even an Italian Catholic family. But my father felt it was important to give us, the family religion, brought us to church on Sundays, made sure we made the first Holy Communion and the confirmation. Then you were pretty much on your own to figure it out. He once said that he thought it was a good idea to give a child, the family religion, so that he would have or she would have something to reject when they grew up. And I think that, I don't practice my faith per se, but I feel deeply, deeply connected to the beauty of my religion, the stained glass in the churches. I mean, you're in a Catholic church, and if you're a young child surrounded by all those grown-ups, your mind is wandering, your eyes are wandering. The smell of incense, the beautiful stained glass, and yet the very difficult material of Christ's life and Stations of the Cross. So it's all a little bit mixed up in there. But yeah, I had an attraction to the concept of the Mother Mary, and her son. And it wasn't until I started writing into the book that I recognized that Mary had lost a son too.
And you lost a son.
My
brother, your brother. You lost
my
your
mother.
brother.
My mother lost a son.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And at a very young age, right?
Yes, he was not quite 5.
Yeah. What was it?
An accidental drowning.
Right.
Yeah, in the wintertime.
Right.
Mm.
Now you're in the Concord Poetry Center, and tell me about that. That's a very unique organization, and why don't you tell me about your involvement there?
It's not a strong involvement. I pay my dues, and but it's a way for poets to get in touch with each other. Susan Richmond is very involved. She's doing the plein air poets out at Old Frog Pond. They have a website. You can put your photograph up there. And I did a workshop there. We formed a workshop. Joan Houlihan still does a workshop there, I think on Wednesday nights. But I had a morning workshop group of women. Some of women I had known from Nadia's class, and others. And
Okay.
I think Joan is busier now with her teaching at Leslie, actually.
Now your poems are very essential in the sense that all the senses are evoked, and I remember reading the Passing By Windows at Saks Fifth Avenue, and there was another poem about getting your hair styled, and about the sort of subtle hints of aging, and hair as a metaphor for, facing one's mortality. One wouldn't think that, but now as I look at my my palette. Yeah, so what were you thinking?
Well, my mother was a hairstylist.
Okay, and now your daughter
in Boston.
is.
My daughter is as well.
Yeah.
My mother was a hairstylist in Boston at the Ritz. She was really a very accomplished hairstylist. Her father had come from Sicily already with his brothers. They were all barbers in Boston on Cambridge Street. So I come from a long line of people who look at this as a profession and take it quite seriously, and they were very good at it. And it's very social, occupation as well. And
like a bartender of hair.
Yeah. Even today, I mean, people, men and women, they confide in their stylists all the time. But, for me, growing up, my mother did our hair, and then, in older age, I learned to do her hair, to learn to tint her hair. And, it's a very tender thing to touch someone's head and to,
Yeah, so that's maybe why it's sort of intimate.
It's very intimate.
When people reveal themselves when someone's touching your head.
Very much.
Right,
I mean, you bend your head back, and someone's rinsing your hair. It's really, it's quite a sensual experience.
Yeah.
I mean, some stylists, have rough hands, and others have really terrific hands. My mother had great hands.
Okay.
And,
Yeah, wonderful. That was a wonderful poem. And so, actually, you've got a lot of time to read from your work. Are there any poets in your family other than you?
Oh, no, how scary. No, there are no writers in my family. They say, it's a little frightening to have a writer in the family because...
Well, you said you had a daughter who worked in the advertising business. Did she write,
briefly.
copy?
No, very brief. but
Oh,
no,
yeah.
no, there are no writers in my immediate family. I have cousins and such who
So
have.
you really had no
No,
childhood push to be a writer, or
no, not at
And
all.
what do they think about your just late?
Well, my father passed before I started writing like this. My mother knew to some degree that I was doing it, but never really read any of my work.
Yeah.
So I have a sister and a brother,
And they interested in your work?
and they've been very supportive. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Very
Okay.
supportive.
Some people, they get very threatened when they hear you're a poet. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Either they really love it or they're fascinated, or they say, "Oh my God," what,
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, many of my friends and family were very kind and, purchased my book ahead of time. And, whether they read it or not, whether they enjoy it or not, it's all up to them. It is a little daunting. It's hard to say I'm a poet. I usually don't. I really have to take a big leap to say, and what do you do? And I say, well, I'm a writer, or,
Yeah.
I'm a poet.
Sounds pretentious.
And then people
doesn't it?
don't quite know what to say. Oh, well, what kind of poetry do you write?
Or do you make a living that way?
Yeah, or, have you published, So it's, that can be very hard until you've published. Having a book is great. It's like, yes, I have,
Right.
So, that's sort of a good feeling.
Well, the proof's in the pudding.
Yeah, proof's in the pudding.
So why don't you read us some poems?
Okay. I'm going to start with the epigraph because it sort of sets the stage. What is it to be born, woman unto woman, mother bearing mother? Are we born tough or tender? Will we be soothed or ruined? How far back are we born? Chrysalis. At times I catch myself in small-scale gestures. Once a hand curled round a rail. Folded in the sheets I mimic coma. My chin lifted, my jaw slack. That's when she comes to me. Is it even possible I feel her in my teeth? The many flights of day await me. Bodies all contain what came before. This next poem is a...
How, when you read, I mean, are you finding that the more readings you do, you're bringing more are you more animated? Are you deliberately slowing down, the line breaks and all that stuff? How you've been finding that?
Yeah, I think it's hard enough for people to hear, a poem.
Right.
We're not really tuned to that as much. And I think if you do slow down a little bit, it does help. It's better if people are reading, I suppose, a poem, but it's fun to sit back and listen as well. And I think it's important to give people an opportunity to hear, what you're saying. If you go too fast,
Or you can have you can have a great poem and you read it in a dull monotone. You can make Shakespeare sound like,
it can really be rough.
Yeah.
It can be really rough. And I think, you gave me an opportunity at the Newton Library Series to do open mic, and, it's a great practice. It's just a wonderful, fun, and, the little bit of ham comes out in you. You stand up, and all of a sudden you can do it.
Yeah.
And it feels good.
Okay.
It feels really good.
Good.
This is actually a story my mother told me. It's called Full Pink. April's moon. A man stepping out of a tenement into the slight light, carrying his newborn's afterbirth wrapped in the evening globe. A returning to that child. How she once mimed her father's language of hands in the telling. Held her palms open as if receiving something of her own mystery. Each of her hands folding in and over in turn as he had done, until her hands held only each other.
Maybe you can read us that one about the hair one.
I can.
Because as you know, hair today, gone tomorrow.
Here today, gone tomorrow. It's called The Quiet Between Us. Careful with the comb, careful with your hairline, just as you taught me. Smearing the rose with my gloved thumb, put off by the dye as you are, its crude suffocation. Your gold mirror still with its urgencies. I am the saving child, born after and unknowing to pull you from the soft kill mire of grief. I am the child still here, warm, clear stream. Lean back, mother, into my hands. I'll rinse the black from your hair.
Nice. Go ahead. Keep reading.
Keep
We've
reading.
still got time. We got a lot of time.
You know, in a collection, I'm not really sure all the poems stand on their own, but in the collection, this is a fun poem. It's called Mouth to Mouth, 1964. This is for my sister Ellen. In the living room, in the 15 minutes after having lunch, before we have to walk back to school, you let me try it on you. You're 8 years old and not squeamish about saliva. We love our poodle. As I close my mouth over yours and pinch close your nose, your belly under your dress rising as it fills with my breath, then deflating like a balloon with a pinhole prick, as I turn my head to fill my lungs again with fresh air, and then your belly rising as I exhale into you, and we seem like one being now. We seem like we could go on doing this forever, and our mother in the kitchen rinsing dishes, not coming in to see how one of her children could possibly resuscitate the other.
How hard is it to reach back that many years and come up with something? I mean, these are...
No. You know, as I said, I think that there's a tremendous amount of thinking, you know, that goes into writing. And I have a tremendous interior life. I always did. And I think that in that sense, you know, once that, you know, little memory might come back into my mind, I'm there. You know,
there was one poem that was listed by a smell, if I remember, a fragrance or something.
The last one?
That might be it. And, you know, like we always go back to Proust,
Yes.
you know, with the smell of mandolin. You had the smell of...
well, I'm not sure.
What's that?
Is this the one about the placenta? The scent
No,
draws
I
me
don't
in?
know. The placenta?
Well, let me read it.
Oh, all right, well,
this
it's with
is-
smell, right? I mean, yeah,
This is the title poem, Comes a
Okay.
Blossom.
I read so many poems, sometimes I get confused.
Yes, it's easy
you know?
to. Yeah,
Okay.
but you know, scent
But
plays a
smell
role.
is, you know,
Oh,
I mean,
you
I
want
can...
me to read? I know you want me to read this one. No, I'm sorry.
Because, you know,
Yeah.
I know if
Yeah.
I smell, like I'm
Yes.
Jewish, right?
Yeah.
So if I smell a kishka or a kasha or something like that,
Yeah,
it just brings a
transports
flood
you.
of memories
Right.
back to the Bronx
It's
or
this
something.
one.
Yeah,
It's called Passing by Windows at Saks Fifth
Yeah.
Avenue.
that's the one, yeah. But I was getting into the, yeah.
Drifting. A whiff of ammonia. My mind combs itself. Mother at the kitchen sink, pinkish rat-tailed comb, gold-framed mirror nearby, tilted. Panes rubbed and lustered, potent chemical flow. Slippery image, her hands deft at her head, slick black wet. The comb's pale teeth parting, parting.
Nice, nice.
One more?
Yeah, oh, a few more, actually. We got 7 minutes, so
We have 7 minutes. Wow. Okay.
here on Poet to Poet. By the way, just to let you folks know while you're looking for your next poem, we have on September 19th here on Poet to Poet, Sam Cornish, the former Boston Poet Laureate, the first Boston Poet Laureate, first African-American Boston Poet Laureate, first Poet Laureate period of Boston. And then after that, we're very hopeful to have the famed playwright Israel Horovitz, who is right now in the middle of making a motion picture called My Old Lady. And he has his first book of poetry out, Heaven and Other Poems. So you're in good company.
Sounds great.
Yeah, okay.
Look forward to it.
Yep.
This poem is called Truly Badly. One color crazy for the hue next to it. Color coming on strong or slipped in here, there. Hot pink and gold a twirl. Red coaxing navy. Her lingerie, cotton aprons. No bibs to hide the bosom's curves. Violet sidling blue, lickin' peach too, in rows like finger waves. Serpentine as dough for pie under her touch. Pie, bread, cake, husband. Aprons tied with a wide bow and back, party dress style. She loves body. Fresh, firm apples, green and tart. Sweetening. Scent laced with cinnamon. Island nutmeg. A lot of fragrance in there. My mother loved to bake.
Okay.
Many mothers do.
Yeah.
This
And
poem,
food is another thing. I mean, food is also great. The smell and the actual food itself, and the
yeah.
dinners, and
Yeah.
you know, I remember, you know, years ago when I did my thesis and I did about food and the fiction of Henry Roth. My thesis advisor at the time said initially I thought that would be trivial, but food isn't trivial,
Oh
is
gosh,
it?
no.
I
No.
mean, it's
Food is
so-
love.
Food is love, and now
Yeah.
they have like at Harvard. I know they have this whole
Mhm.
collection on food writing and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. Food is love.
And all the, you know, we're all breaking bread and the family dinners.
And if
And
it, yes, and my mother was, you know, she was the quintessential, you know, 60s mom. She
Yeah.
was home with the apron, the 3 meals a day. We came home for lunch and dinners, and, you know, but you bake the soul right into, you know, the pie.
yeah, yeah.
This one is called Fusion. She takes her newborn to her breast, forgets the dole of mourning doves shifting in her garden, fills the bassinet, keeps her head above water, wraps her in swaddling blues. But soon, something seeps up, her son a lodestone in the lap of the earth, the shadowing of her face, a mirror draped, her gaze pulled away, chin insistent as an arrow, the infant following it to try to see what could be more interesting.
Right.
So that's a, you know, Jungian concept of the mother and child fusing, which can inhibit the child from, you know, in time finding their own voice, their own way in the world.
Well, that's a time-old conflict, right? I mean, that's one of the great...
Yeah, and when you have, right, when a mother's attention is taken away from her children, you know, it can be anything. People have griefs and sorrows and regrets and loss in their lives, whether it's alcoholism or cancer or, you know, a child who's born disabled or, you know, whatever.
Do you have
the
any
griefs
regrets
are.
about your relationship? We all do. Do you have any regrets
no.
about any regrets at all?
With
about
my
your-
mom?
yeah.
Oh, no. No.
You had closure with her?
Yeah,
and
we
all
had a
that?
wonderful, she...
Is she still alive? Right?
No, she's not still
Yeah,
alive.
yeah, yeah.
No, no. I took both my parents, you know, right to the end. It was a great honor, privilege, just a great experience to be with them.
Okay.
To the end. You know, the dutiful daughter, but I needed them as much as they needed me. To that effect, I will read. It's called Quickening. Equinox coming, the sun about to crown some invisible celestial border, and in the many corridors, moans mistaken. No longer can I coax a curl across her brow, no longer whisper into the whirl of her ear, nor lift a